Welcome back to another episode of Rob Sports Center. Man, as you can see, I'm coming at y'all with the weekly edition of Third and Long. As you can see, man, I ain't got my special co-host D Jones with me today, man. He was having some little, health problems. He good, but he just, having a little sickness he having to kind of try to shake. But everything's all good. So I'm gonna go ahead and come at y'all with this episode this week by myself. So, man, you already know how we do over here, man. We're gonna do a recap of the semifinals, and then we're gonna do a preview of the state championship game. This was an interesting week of football. I would say a final week of the playoffs going into the championship game, and you had a lot of good games lined up. I think some teams showed some true championship pedigree. We had a couple teams that fell behind kind of early on and was having to battle back to show, that they belong where they at. So it was an interesting week. So I'm gonna kind of just go down the list. I don't really have it in no specific order. I just went on Go Preps and just wrote down everything and kind of just went like that. So we're gonna kind of just call them off like that. So the very first game we had was Ouachita versus Neville. Ouachita trying to win this game 14-7. So we knew that we had a rematch of a divisional rematch of the regular season from Division 2-5A with Ouachita and Neville. Neville ended up winning the game. I think they ended up winning the game by 1 point, and I think that it was 3 special team blunders that kind of came back to hurt Ouachita. And if you erase those three special team blunders, you kind of the outcome might have been a little differently. Ouachita might have ended up pulling that game off, but unfortunately, they wasn't able to capitalize on that. Now, the thing about Ouachita is, me and my buddy D Jones, obviously you heard us talking, going into the playoffs and how we was talking about Ouachita was a team that was probably going to upset a lot of teams, right? Based off of standing. So I think, what was Ouachita? Ouachita is the number 14 seed. So if you're going based off of standings, it was going to be teams that was ranked higher than them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they was better than them. So let me get to my explaining for that for those who may not understand what I'm trying to say. So basically what I'm saying is, you look at two of the hardest divisions in the state of Louisiana, in the 5A, select and non-select is, for the non-select is Division 2-5A with Ruston, West Monroe, Neville, Ouachita, Pineville, and Alexandria. And then you have the Catholic League with Edna Carr, which you have Carr, St. Aug, Curtis, who else? Carr, St. Aug, Curtis, I think Jesuit, and I believe, I don't think Holy Cross is in that division. If not, just correct me on that. But they got a pretty hard division as well down there. So Ouachita started the season off pretty good. They was undefeated at one point. I think they might have got to maybe 5-0 up until they played Ruston. And you look at, for me, my biggest thing was that I never doubted Ouachita in terms of saying that they're not going to be good enough early on. I was like, I can't really judge it because of the level of competition that they were playing, because they wasn't playing, other than Captain Shreve, who they beat week 1. I think everything else was kind of like 3A and 4A teams and stuff like that. So, I'm just saying, the teams that y'all are beating and playing, that y'all are not going to be teams that y'all are going to see in the playoffs. So eventually they got to district. They lost every game in district other than against Pineville. But when you look at the losses and you look at who they lost to, which was Ruston, they lost to West Monroe, they lost to Neville, and they lost to Alexandria. And in all those games, they were competitive games. It wasn't like they were getting blown out. And like me and D Jones always say, the only game that might seem as if they got beat worse than what it was against West Monroe, and that kind of was just because of the late interceptions that Connor threw, kind of trying to make something happen in that game. But for the most part, they were competitive in all those games, so we pretty much all knew that they were a good team, and their record doesn't dictate how good of a team that they are, if that makes any sense. We knew that when we come into the playoffs, they was going to be coming out the division really battle tested, really prepared for anybody who they might run up on. You look at how they was able to handle business on St. Amant, they was able to handle business on Destrehan, and then they was able to handle business on Neville. And obviously, you look at Neville. Neville kind of had an up and down season to me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't expect Neville to be in the semifinals based off of how the regular season was, because they just really was struggling to hit a stride offensively. I think for the most part, the defense stood up as long as they could, but it's only so much that your defense can do if you're constantly going 3 and outs, and if the offense isn't able to put drives together to give you guys time to break, to get breath, and the other teams are able to put together substantial drives, especially if they're able to come up with points, whether it be 3 points or whether it be a full long touchdown. So at some point, your defense is only going to be able to hold up for so long going up against good teams. So we had a good matchup, a rematch of the Division 2-5A, and it was a defensive game. Ouachita ended up pulling that game off 14-7. I looked at early on, Neville was able to come out. Well, Ouachita was actually able to, drive down the field early. I think on the opening drive, first drive, and get down into the red zone. Neville stood tall in it, was able to get a stop, and they got a turnover on downs. Well, no, I take that back. It wasn't a turnover on downs. They forced them have to. Not that it was a turnover on downs. Yeah, they did. Yeah, so Washita went for it with a turnover on down. So when Neville got the ball back, they went 3 and out based off of the positioning. And then when they punted the ball, Neville was able to, Washita was able to block the punt, put them right back where they was at, and they was able to capitalize on points. So if you say that special teams blunder right there doesn't happen, it might be a 7-7 ball game. But at the same time, we look at throughout the year how special teams kind of hurt Washita. So that could have been some things that they worked on going into this game or going into the playoffs. I know that they had a punt block for a touchdown in the Ruston game. They had 3 bad special team plays in the Neville game. I think they might have had one bad special teams play in the Alexandria game. So special teams in some ways was kind of hurting them. So I think that was a focus going into the playoffs that they was able to kind of get into order. And so far that they've been capitalizing off of it. I know we've seen Waddell have a punt return for a touchdown in the Destrehan game. I know we've seen obviously them get the block punt in a Neville game. So that's something that they have fixed. But I think ultimately, man, like you say, it was a defensive game. The thing is, like, you look at it and you say, okay, the thing about Washita that I would say is that they have been dominant in the trenches, offensively wise, being able to kind of manage the game, put together drives, bleed the clock, but then more times not actually come up with points off of those drives too. So they've been able to really manage the game in terms of how they've been playing. It's not really a high rate, it's not really a throwing the ball type offense. I mean, they will take shots down the field here and there. I think that if you put them in a position to where they having to play from behind and now they might have to rely on the pass a little bit more, then you probably have a better chance to beat them. But if you allow them to get out and control the game from the beginning, it's going to be kind of hard for you to get back into it. I mean, I know we talk about Waddell Clark, who's a dog. I mean, that kid affects all 3 phases of the games: offense, special teams, defense. If you look at his body of work over this season, including the playoffs, man, you just got to salute to him, man. That kid is a phenomenal athlete. And you look at what he does, but I think an engine and a catalyst for a lot of what goes on offensively is Connor. And I was just looking at him like over the course of last year and this year, that kid is a problem, man. Just looking at him, like, he's one of those guys that every time the ball touches his hands, which is crazy and is terrifying too, being that he's a quarterback, because his hands touching the ball pretty much every play offensively. Every time he touches the ball, my heart almost drops, because he has that electrifying big play ability. Now, when I say my heart almost drops, it's coming from if you are a fan of the opposing team. Now, if you're a fan of Washita, then you excited every time he touches the ball because he has that big play capability, and he obviously MJ Day too does a good job at being able to open up things, running the ball too. So they're a phenomenal team, man. I mean, right now they're looking like one of the more complete teams that's left in the going into the state championships, offensively, defense, special teams. They've been able to affect it on all phases. To me, I think the strength of their defense, obviously we know they got Big Berryman up the middle, but I think the strength of their defense is their secondary, their pass defense, and I think that's kind of what won in the game against Neville, because we know that Neville runs a lot of RPO, right? For those who may not know, RPO is run pass option. So the whole objective of run RPO offense is to try to put defenders in conflict. So to put defenders in conflict, you have to identify defenders that have run and pass responsibility. So linebackers are typically those, and safeties are typically those, depending on the defense that you're running. So one way to beat RPO offenses would be to play man coverage, right? Because more times than not, they're going to be reading your outside linebacker or your nickel corner, right? And if he comes up to play the run, because they're going to have a mesh point like that, if he comes up to play the run, then the quarterback pulls and throw. If he stays back to play the pass, the quarterback just hands it off, because it's all about getting numbers. You want to be able to have equal numbers on your offensive line that's blocking to the numbers that's in the box. So in the box, if the numbers are equal and he doesn't play, then we want that as an offense. Now, if the numbers are equal and you have a plus one guy that has a free run at your running back or whoever the case may be, then you want to just throw that ball off now, because it's one less guy in the pass game. So to be able to minimize that, you just play man coverage. So now that outside linebacker, or in most defenses today, 4-2-5, that nickel corner, he's not in conflict now because he's playing man to man. So he's going to play pass first. So now you can't read him. So now it makes it a little bit difficult. And when you have guys that's on the outside, like I use the Saban term, when you have cats on the outside that's better than those cats on the other side, from a defensive side, like I say, that's the strength of Washita is their secondary, then it minimizes a lot of what you can do from a offensive standpoint. And now you have to be able to run the ball. But now when you're running the ball, guess who you're running the ball up to? Up into Big Berryman that's up the middle, or up into those other guys that's able to be complementary pieces off that. And one thing I will say too that they do a good job at is coming downhill and making those tackles and filling those gaps. So, playing a team like Washita, you kind of have to have a well-rounded game and not really just so one-dimensional in terms of being a pass, because Neville obviously is a pass-heavy team. They pass a lot more often. So I think that was one of the things. And two, I just think that they were able to affect Connor. Connor never really looked comfortable from what I was looking. He always like he had happy feet and kind of was questioning his he wasn't too confident in himself or even confident in his protection. So a lot of the times it's almost like he was hearing footsteps that wasn't even there. He was rolling out of the pocket too early, opposed to just sitting in there waiting for some of those guys to possibly develop. And I mean, obviously, man, when you got a good pass rush that can get to a quarterback like that, then it makes it very hard for him to be comfortable in there. I mean, obviously he's this was his junior year, going to his senior year now. Obviously sophomore year, we've seen him kind of grow up over the course of the season. You look at the game early on against Ruston when they played his first year in the Bayou Jamboree. He had threw 2 interceptions in that, but you've seen him kind of play from it. And as the season went on, you kind of seen him play with a little bit more confidence. But I think that it possibly could be like me and my man D Jones were talking off camera, that it kind of could be one of those things where it's like the moment just be too big for him in a sense, and I think that's kind of what it was, the magnitude of the game. But nevertheless, man, that was an impressive win by Ouachita for them to be able to come on the road into enemy territory and come out with the win the way that they did. Man, you got to salute to them. So now, next game we're going to jump on to is Ruston versus Zachary, man, which was a pretty interesting game. It was a rematch of last year. Actually, Ruston and Zachary done played like the last, I want to say 5 years. I think they played in 2022. I think they played in 2022 when they beat them to get to the state championship against Desterham. They played in 2023 in the state championship. They played in 2024, Ruston's first game after the bye, and then they played this year. So what is that, like 4 years straight? And I think they might have played 5 years too, if I'm not mistaken. But the last 5 years that they've played, Ruston has been victorious in the game. And one of those things that people always like to say is that it's hard to beat a team twice, or it's hard to beat a team in 3, 4, 5 times in a row. It was a good game from beginning to end, man. I think it was a well-rounded game on both teams. I mean, you didn't really have any turnovers. Ruston didn't have any fumbles or any interceptions that was recovered at least. Same thing for Zachary. I know they ended up fumbling on a jet sweep, but they was able to recover and just kind of put them behind the sticks. And the thing that was hurting Zachary too was a lot of pre-snap penalties that was kind of killing them and kind of putting them behind the sticks, in a sense, and playing like how they play, being that they kind of a run-heavy team too. You don't really want to be behind the sticks, because if you find yourself looking at a 1st and 12 or 1st and 15, and now your second down play isn't that good, and you're not able to get no yards, able to maybe just get 2 or 3 yards. Now you're looking at 3rd and long. That's not really territory that you want to be at in terms of, from an offensive standpoint, regardless if you are a run-heavy team or a pass-heavy team, because now defense can get freaky in what they can call up in terms of calling up blitzes. I mean, they can show the line, show that they're finna show us that they're finna do an all-out blitz and drop guys back into coverage, and then sometimes they can send the house at you on that situation too. So it kind of dictates what they can do in a sense, opposed to making it a convertible third and convertible, or 2nd and convertible, where your options are a little bit more open. This was a game that was dominated by the trenches battle, right? For those who may not know, I mean, when I say the trenches, offensively for Ruston, their offensive line, to me, just dominated Zachary's defensive line. And offensively from Zachary, offensive line, they just dominated Ruston's defensive line. I mean, for the most part, you look at the first series, Zachary pretty much milked the ball the whole first quarter, and, kind of was having that way. Ruston was able to get some stops, get a stop eventually when they needed to in the red zone. Zachary ended up getting a 4th down where they probably could have kicked the field goal, but they decided to go for it, and Ruston was able to get a stop. But then Ruston ended up going for it on 4th down too eventually later on in the game, so they ended up getting a stop there too. So I feel like that kind of evened itself out. But like I say, man, kudos to Ruston for what they have been able to do over the last 4 years with being able to go to a 4th straight state championship. I know a lot of times that if you watch my videos that I'd be real critical of them. Obviously, and rightfully so. Whenever you have a team that you're pulling for, you're gonna always be a little bit more critical over them, because you're looking at areas where we have to fix this, because if we don't, it can eventually catch up with us. And for me, that's been the thing with Ruston, has been their defense, man. It's just been, they haven't really been able to dictate to offenses what they want them to do. It's kind of like, you just kind of being on your heels most of the time, and then every now and then you will probably be able to get your feet firmly and be able to get stops, but for the most part, you're not really dictating. That's kind of a dangerous place to be, especially because, in my opinion, that, in order to get to this championship, or in order to make a championship run, or in order to win a championship, you have to go to play defense, which at the end of the day, Ruston is able to get those stops when those stops are needed the most. I mean, you look at coming out of half, how they was able to kind of, I think, stop Zachary on their first 2 drives coming out of half, and you just like, okay, man, if they can just play with this intensity all game long, they'll be a real hard team to beat. And, I always kind of second what Coach Ball was saying going into the season with the inconsistency at times with the team, how sometimes they look like, okay, man, this team right here is going to be a hard team to beat, and then they double back and do some things, and then you kind of just be like, they're not really looking too good. And it's kind of been a uphill battle with that throughout the course of the season. But nevertheless, man, they was able to kind of pull it out. And I want to, send a special shout out to Coach Chubb, offensive coordinator, but then also too, to the offensive line and whoever the offensive line coach is up there too, man. 'Cause I'm just watching that game, man. I texted my man D Jones last night. I went back and I'm just watching that game play by play by play, and I'm just looking at the offensive line. And when I'm telling you, man, they're moving stuff, man. You got plays where they're pulling the guard. You got plays where they're pulling the guard and tackle. You got plays where they're lining up the H-back in an offset position. They're pulling him, so they're giving so many different leads. So obviously, as a linebacker, you're taught to read through the guard to the running back. So if they're pulling, you're trying to stay in front of it. So some plays they're pulling, some plays they're not. Some plays they're running from under center, some plays they're running from the shotgun, and they run and throw from both. So it's not like, okay, when they get on the shotgun, they gonna throw the ball. Or when they get on the center, it's both. They'll throw from under center and they'll pass from under center. So it kind of just keeps you off balance. Like if you look at the opening drive when Rustin was able to get the ball back. Now, granted, too, somebody else who made some plays for Sam Hartwell and a couple of those long third and long conversions, man, he was able to kind of keep his eyes downfield, and be able to open up some opportunities running. Because I was saying too, and that's something else that Rustin does often is kind of put themselves in situations where they're behind the sticks as well. And most of theirs are normally like tackle for losses on first down, and now you're looking at second and long. And if you don't really get a good play call on second and long, now you're looking at third and long. And now your quarterback, fortunately, like Sam, who is mobile, who is elusive, and who can't make plays with his legs, were able to come up with some good first downs there. But that's not a territory that you want to be in, especially when you're going up against a good defense like Zachary was. But they give you a lot of different looks offensively, and it kind of keeps you off guard. And I think that's kind of what it was. They kind of had Zachary defense off guard all night, and they didn't kind of really know what to expect. And I mean, it was domination from their offense to Zachary's defense, and it's kind of was the same thing. It's just Rustin was able to get a few more stops defensively against Zachary's offense than Zachary's defense was against Rustin's offense. So Rustin ended up pulling that game off 21-17 to cap off a good season and to solidify their fourth state championship title game. The next game we have was North DeSoto versus Plaquemine. So this is another one of those games where also too, Rustin was at one point was down in the game against Zachary as well, just like how they was against Southside too. That's why I was saying early on when you had teams who showed championship pedigree to be able to come from behind. And just to kind of piggyback off of Rustin too, I think that's one of the things that I've noticed about them as well. I was looking at a guy who played linebacker for out off of Georgia. He was talking about one year when they played Alabama. I can't think of this guy's name, but he was just talking about this was when Nick Saban was still at Alabama, and obviously Kirby Smart was at Georgia, and he was just saying that the first half they were kind of dominating Alabama. This was I think it might have been an SEC championship game, and they talking noise, they hype up. So he was like, they come into the locker room at halftime, they come in there talking noise. So he was like, Kirby Smart comes into the locker room and he has a still face, kind of just like kind of nervous in a sense. And, they kind of looking at it and kind of trying to, gauge what he's thinking. And he was just telling them, he's like, man, here y'all is in here happy and celebrating. The game isn't even won. And you look over there at those guys, they're not even looking at the scoreboard, meaning that they're focused on doing the things that they need to do to win the game. So the scoreboard isn't necessarily what they're focused on. They're focused on, okay, guys, we're not blocking the way we need to be blocking receivers. We're not able to beat man-to-man coverage. Quarterback, we're not making smart decisions. Those are all things that we can control. The score we're not worried about, because if we don't get these things fixed first, then it doesn't even matter, right? But that's the championship pedigree that you have. I think he called it, they got trained killers over there, but it's the championship pedigree. When you've been in this situation consistently year after year after year after year, at some point, the overall understanding of the moment, and the moment is never too big because you're so acquainted with being in that position. I think that kind of is one of the things that Rustin has shown throughout the season and throughout the playoffs too, that even when they go down, they don't panic, they stay calm, they stay composed, and they're able to fight back and come from behind. But North DeSoto to me also showed that trait as well. They ended up winning that game 58-44, but I think at one point North DeSoto might have went down 17-0, man. Like, it was kind of crazy. Like, I was like, man, this was a good season. North DeSoto got on my radar when they beat West Monroe early on this year, because in my mind I was thinking that was going to be an easy game for West Monroe, being that North DeSoto was 4-5. I know sometimes I do be thinking kind of one-sided like that. I got to get better at that on my part, but they was able to carve off that win right there, and I think that was a win where they actually came to West Monroe too, if I'm not mistaken, so that's what make it even more impressive. But they showed championship pedigree to be able to fight back from behind and to be able to capitalize on that game, and being able to solidify their state championship run. So if you see me kind of looking down, I'm looking down because I'm kind of reading off the paper right here and stuff like that. The next game we had Belle Chase versus Iowa. Iowa ended up winning that game 28-21. That was a pretty close game as well. The next game we had was Union versus Gina. So here's the thing about the Union versus Gina. Well, Union Parish for one. So I have a coworker I work with, and we was talking throughout the season, and she was just talking about how it's not looking too good for Union this year just because of how the season started off with them, But I was telling her, you got to look at the teams that y'all played early on. Y'all played Alexandria, which was a good football team, 5A football team, right? Y'all played Airline, who was a good 5A football team, right? Both of these teams end up making it to the playoffs. So, and I think they actually got shut out 0 points in both of those games. But like I was telling her, it's one of those things where you want to challenge your guys, and you don't ever want your guys to get complacent, right? And challenge and scheduling harder competition, especially going into district, it battle tests them, right? Like in my mind, it's almost one of them things. It's like, okay, when we line up against teams that's just head and shoulders better than us, and even if we're able to compete, now the score might not dictate how we were able to compete, because it could have been battles within the game, because you have 11 different positions on the football field. So it could have been battles within those 11 positions that we were winning. We just couldn't win them consistently. And we go back and we watch tape and we say, man, if we would have just did this right, if we would have did this right, we might would have had a better chance at beating those teams. But it gives you a level of confidence of saying, okay, when we get to district, we're not playing no team like Airline. We're not playing a team like Alexandria. So when we get to equal competition, it's game on at that point. And I know Union, a lot of people kind of was overlooking them going into the playoffs. I think they were kind of a low seed as well. And just looking at how they was able to go on the road in some games and carve off some wins was very impressive. But to me, I was telling people I wasn't surprised, just because look at the history, for one, of what they've been able to do over the last few years. And when you have success year in and year out, it tells you that it's more of a culture thing than necessarily just only players thing, right? Now, when you mix good players with good culture, then you get phenomenal results. But for you to have success year in and year out, it shows that it's a good culture. So if you got a good culture, then you're always going to have a chance at winning. And then, like, to me, the ultimate chance of winning is always just belief that we can beat these teams. And when you go up against these higher power teams and you're able to compete with them to an extent, it gives you that level of confidence. And when you finally run up on guys that's equal as you, it's almost like, man, we ain't seen, it's nothing that they present that we haven't seen yet so far. So, let's just bring it in there. And I think that's what they was able to do. Unfortunately, Gina was able to pull it off 30-6, and that cemented Gina's run to a state championship. The next game was interesting, which was Sterlington and St. James. Now, going into the playoffs, I know I was telling my co-host D Jones, I was saying that, to me, I can name you 3 teams that I figured was going to be the ones to win state. Sterlington was one of them. LCA was another one, which they ended up losing. And then Edna Carr was the other one. So right here, you had Sterlington versus St. James, had a state championship rematch from last year, man. And Sterlington dominated, obviously, in Sterlington fashion, 63-38, cementing their second straight year going to the state championship. And like I said, man, the way it's looking, I think that when you're putting up playing the game that they're playing, obviously we know that the type of offense that they run, real run heavy offense, real clock management, real game management, and that's a good type of offense, especially when you're going against offenses that may be high-powered offense, because your offense can't be good or your offense can't be effective. They're sitting on the bench, and if we got an offense that can keep the ball out of their hands, we like our opportunities with that. Obviously, we know St. James has a lot of athletes, but like I say, man, if they're constantly on the bench, they can't really be effective. But I think Sterlington does a good job of just playing, all 3 phases of the game, in terms of offense, defense, special teams. Now, I know they go for it a lot on 4th down, so they are a 4th down territory team, but you got to think about it. Whenever they score and they're kicking the ball off, they got to have good kickoff coverage to not be giving up explosive plays consistently. So that right there shows you that they are playing some good football. And they're another one of those teams, too, I feel like, that has just a good overall culture. And like I was saying, man, when you got good culture, man, more times than not, man, you're going to always have a shot at winning. The next game we had was Jeanerette versus Haynesville. It looks like they end up winning that game. Was it 47-6? It looks like. I hope it's 47-6, and I didn't miswrite anything. If I did, I'm so sorry. Looking at how it's looking, it's showing a 0 and a 6, so I don't know why I just didn't put 0 to that. But okay, I'm looking at it right. Yeah, it's 47-6. Yeah, so Haynesville winning that game 47-6. That was my bad right there. Just bad writing. Haynesville winning that game 47-6, and obviously, man, we've seen what Haynesville been able to do week to week this year, so that's no surprise. And that's another team that you pretty much was expecting to also be fighting for a state championship game. The next game we had South Platte going up against Mangum. Mangum was able to pull off that game 49-14. Like I was telling, like me and my co-host D Jones be talking, and I was telling him how Mangum earned my respect this year when they was able to beat Oak Grove. Just kind of looking at like Oak Grove and who they are as a program. Obviously you're always gonna have high expectations for them, and it's hard for you to go against them just because of the year after year success. So when Mangum was able to pull that game off, it was almost kind of similar to the North DeSoto versus West Monroe. And It's like, okay, my bad. I think I'm overlooking them. Let me just put a little bit more respect on their name. So they kind of garnished my attention from there. We had Catholic BR going up against Edna Carr. So that was a pretty interesting game, man. Obviously, we know going into this game that last year on Edna Carr State Championship run, Catholic BR was the team to give them the closest game. Now this year, American Heritage gave them a close game. Obviously, that game ended up going to overtime, which Carr ended up winning. So now, in my opinion, Rumble made it a pretty close game up until the second half, and Carr was able to kind of pull off from them. But we kind of figured that Catholic BR was going to be able to give them a hard game. And considering like what they was able to do to Alexandria the previous week, you kind of had some pretty high expectations coming into that, because I had actually picked Alexandria to win that game. I would have never thought that Catholic BR would have dominated that game the way that they dominated. And I know that they were saying that I think that it was 3 turnovers that Catholic had that kind of ended up hurting them. And I know it was a holding call too. It's one of them things where you say to yourself, it didn't look like holding to me. I'm going to be honest with you. To me, it looked like the DB for the most part had his eyes back at the balls to try to locate where the ball was at. But obviously, the official made the call that he thought was the right call. And we can't just say that was a deciding factor in that game being won, because I think that they had opportunities to capitalize and be able to do things outside of that too. But sometimes you kind of hate those calls right there, because sometimes it's kind of a toss up. To me, if both guys are hand fight, it's fair play. But if one guy is pushing off from an offensive standpoint, the other guy is pulling and holding from a defense standpoint, and he's not locating the ball. And here's another thing too I want people to realize as well too, for those who may not know football. It's a thing called playing in phase and out of phase. So in phase is when you're right there on the inside hip or outside hip or wherever you're at, you're playing the cornerback and you're able to get your eyes back to locate the ball. That's called playing in phase. Now, it's a thing called out of phase whenever you're beat. So let's just say if a guy does a double move and you come down and bite on that double move and he's able to get behind you, and now you're running to try to get yourself in better position to defend the ball. Now, when you're playing out of phase, you're taught to play through the receiver hands. So once the receiver hands go up to make a catch, right, you don't have to turn your head back around, because if you beat and you turn your head back around, you completely lost on that play right there. But if you beat and you just focus on getting back into a better position and you're able to play through the receiver hands, that's not a pass interference call. But you can't be grabbing, you can't be really doing anything to kind of alter his position and take him out of position from being able to catch the ball. But that was one of those calls that you kind of just be like, I kind of would like to see a no call there, especially considering the magnitude of the game. And I think there was a call that they didn't call on Catholic that it might have been a hold on Carr, but nevertheless, Carr was able to win that game 17-10. But like I say, Catholic was able to play them hard. And I think the thing that like, to me, outside looking in, is that the thing about a team like Catholic is that when you look at how they was able to play them competitively 2 years in a row, right? And for one, kudos to Catholic too, man. Just look at their last 3 years. I think in 2023, obviously they won state championship, and then you look at last year they was 1 game away, Carr put them out, and you look at this year they was 1 game away from another state championship, Carr put them out. So kudos to them. That's another sign of a good program as well. But for me, the overall thing to me is that Catholic BR, they just embody the mentality of not being afraid of Carr. I think that a lot of teams that play Carr, they are defeated pre-game before they ever step on in between the white lines, just because of, you look at everything that comes with Carr. They'll be nationally ranked, the number 8 seed, being the number 1 team in Louisiana. They hadn't lost since 2022. So you look at a lot of those things, and then just look at their interests, man. Their interests is like a movie, man. Just seeing how they come out so hyped, so much noise. You seeing the fireworks in some games, the smoke and things like that. So for younger guys that's not really fully at that level of full development, it can be a little intimidating for them, and that can kind of trickle off into the game. And then you look at guys like Richard Anderson. You look at the guy, I think, number 15 on the defensive line. You look at Joel Baptiste. You look at the energy that they play with Aiden Hall and Hayward Howard in the secondary, man. So they can be a very intimidating team. So you're already intimidated going into the game, and then when you get in the game, these guys are physical, these guys are fast, and they playing with that swag and their energy, man. I think that a lot of it is an intimidation factor. But Catholic BR shows that they saying like, hey man, check this out. We get that y'all good. We get that y'all national rank, and all of that is, important, and kudos to y'all. But man, y'all, bleed just like we bleed. So when we step into the white lines, regardless of what anybody thinks, we're on the same playing field. Because for me to even be at this position of playing y'all, I have to be good for me to even get here. So why am I second guessing myself? We're gonna leave it all in between the white lines, and if we do everything that we need to do, we can very much come out with a victory in this game. But Carr was able to end up pulling that one off 17-10. So kudos to them. But then also too, you got to look at Carr. It just shows championship pedigree that they have. Like, once again, man, just being that everybody's always like, oh, they might not be battle tested because of how they've been winning. Well, let's look at one thing. Look at who they beat. Curtis, All, who else? Curtis, All, Rummel, Shaw, good football teams that they've beaten, Holy Cross, Jesuit, they've beaten good football teams, American Heritage. It's not their fault that they've just been able to dominate majority of these games that they have won. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they wasn't battle tested, because you look at when they was tested against Heritage in overtime, they came back and won that game. You look at this game where they was tested against Catholic BR, they were still able to find some way to win. So that just shows that they also have a good culture on top of having good players over there as well. And one of the things that I hate hearing from a lot of people is that, oh man, if you had all these athletes, then you will be as good too. And it's like, that's not the case at all, because good athletes without proper coaching and proper preparation, it serves you no purpose. It's no difference than what I was saying with a team like Sterlington. When you got a phenomenal offense that you're going up against, but if your offense isn't getting the ball and they're sitting on the sideline, how effective can they be from the sideline, right? That's no difference than that. If you don't have the right coaches to prepare and to build that confidence within these guys to believe in their athleticism, you don't get those same results. So I hate hearing that. It just shows that Carr does have good coaches over there and a good culture. I mean, they got 15 guys that was able to sign to D1 on signing day. And then one of the most impressive things, I was looking at Crescent City Sports, and they was doing like interviews leading up to the state championship game, and they was interviewing Hayward Howard, and they was just asking him about, like, how does it feel like, that you're playing for another state championship game, and then after this you're going to be going off to Texas. And he was just, he made a very mature response with saying that, man, I'm focused where my feet is at, and right now my feet is at Carr, so we focused on that, and then everything comes after that. So just hearing that just shows that the teachings there, it just has them advanced, not just as football players, but as young men as well. So, man, there's no way, like, when you look at what they're able to do, considering the environment down there in New Orleans, at the end of the day, man, you got to give a kudos to Coach Brown and the staff that they have to be able to, possibly change some of these kids' life, man. You got to give kudos to that. So, the next game, we got John Curtis versus St. Aug. St. Aug ended up winning that game 31-29, which actually was a last-minute win for St. Aug, too. I like that win, man. It came down to a last-minute play at the goal line with a receiver who ran a phenomenal route. He kind of ran like it's like kind of like a zig route where he went in as if he was going to run a slant and kind of just broke back out. The receiver won that route from the release. The corner didn't really get physical with him, gave him a free release, and he was able to open him up when he ran the slant and just pivot that thing back out. It was wide open, and they was able to get the walk-off touchdown in that game. So kudos to St. Aug, man, submitting their first state championship run in a lot of years. And now we got a battle for New Orleans with Edna Carr versus St. Aug. But we're gonna get into that in the preview. The next game we had was University versus St. Charles. St. Charles ended up winning that game 34-27 in OT. This was another one of those games, like I said, man, showing championship pedigree to be able to hold off in that win. The next one we had was Shaw going up against Vanderbilt Catholic. Shaw was able to shut them out 27-0. The next one we had was Dunham versus LCA. Now, this was a high-scoring affair, man. Dunham was able to win that game 49-48. Obviously, we know that Dunham has that phenomenal quarterback down there. I can't think of his name, but shout out to him. But like I said, LCA was one of the teams that I picked to win it. Just looking at how they were able to beat some 5A teams. They beat Evangel. They was able to beat Central, and they was actually beating Central pretty convincing. I know the score doesn't really dictate how that game was going, but they was really getting dominated at one point. But obviously Central was able to kind of battle back and make it a more competitive game. But when I'm looking at that, I'm saying, man, no team in 3A is probably going to beat them. But Dunham was able to hold them off and pull it off 49-48. The next one we have was Calvary versus Notre Dame. Calvary was able to win that game 34-28 in overtime. And like I said, man, Calvary's another one of those programs too that you see that they have success year in and year out. I know a lot of people probably was thinking that they wasn't going to be successful, considering that they lost Abram Wardell, their quarterback, considering they lost their running back that they lost to Texas, and I think they might have lost that receiver that they had too to LA Tech. But it just shows that it's a good culture that they have up there, and it's not just players, that is coaching staff up there as well, from the head coach to the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, to the position coach, and even to the strength and conditioning coach. For you to have success year in and year out like that, it lets you know that what they have is a culture up there, and no matter who is able to plug and play, they're able to maximize on the results from those guys. And like I said, man, just realizing that, every year I'm not going to have the same players. Some players I have, they might be much more athletically gifted, right? And there's so many different things that they can do, right? And some guys, they might not be that much more athletic gifted, but it's things that they can do that we can utilize and get the best out of. So you can't just be looking for the best athletes all the time. Sometimes you got to be looking and saying, okay, what can I get from these players and how can I maximize on their productivity in terms of what they can do to contribute to the team to win. The next game we had was Ascension Catholic versus West Minor Christian. Ascension was able to win that game 45-14, so like that was a pretty dominating game on their part. Next game we had was Ascension Epsicola versus Riverside Academy. Riverside Academy was able to win that game 42-14, so that was a pretty dominating part on them. So man, now we got the state championship preview. So this right here, man, this is a nice lineup of games again we got, man. So I'm gonna start off right here. I'm gonna go from the Division 4 non-select from the top, from the bottom up to the top, and then I'm gonna do the same thing with the select. I'm gonna go from the bottom up to the top. So we're gonna start off right here with this one, man. We got Haynesville coming into this game, number 1, and we got Mangum coming into this game, number 2. This is a battle for the non-select Division 4 state championship. Now, talking to my barber, man. Shout out to my barber, man. You know, he's from Haynesville. He reps that school with pride, man, a lot of pride in him. We was talking just preseason, and he was telling me like, man, we got some dogs over there, man. We got so many backs. We got like 3 different backs. Like we got a good quarterback. You know, just telling me how good they were. So I think I asked him maybe it been like 2 weeks ago about like who he thought would give them the biggest challenge up front that was in front of them possibly. I know he was saying Oak Grove he feel like would have been one. I think he said Mangum was the other one, and I forgot the other one he said would have been one that would have gave him a challenge too. But nevertheless, they was able to battle through all of that and cap off a phenomenal season with going to a state championship. So now we got a nice little matchup with Mangum. I think it's gonna be an interesting game, honestly, man. You know, like I say, at this point, there's no teams there by accident, right? I don't care what you say, nobody there was by accident. You know, you have to work to put yourself in a position in the regular season to get to the playoffs, and you have to work in the playoffs to put yourself in a position to get to the state championship. And you got to look at it. The team that won is not necessarily always the better talented team. They was probably just a team that prepared better, and they was just a team that executed. Like once you get to this point, there's no room for error. And the game that we love so much with football, we don't have a lot of games where we play to get better. Like basketball, you play a lot of games, so you're gonna have games you're gonna play to get better. Baseball, you play a pretty good amount of games, you're gonna have games where you're gonna play to get better. With football, the margin of error is very small. You make one mistake, and that can be a deciding factor in whether your season goes the way you want it to, or it goes the way it doesn't. I think another thing too is just being able to have that battle testedness, being able to say, man, if we fall behind early, we do believe that we have the confidence in ourselves as a team and in our coaching staff that we can overcome anything that we find ourselves into. And then two, just being that you have that overall aura of we've been here before. So when we've been here before, we're not as nervous because this ain't our first time. This is almost like an expectation. You know, we're expecting to be in this position year in and year out, right? And I think Haynesville is one of those teams considering the success that they've had in that program. So when you look at that and you factor those things into consideration, those are one of the deciding factors you got to have going into the game and saying, okay, this could be that. With Mangum, I'm not quite sure how often Mangum has, in terms of their success with their history, how often have they been to the state championships? Have they been competing for one year in and year out? I know that like even when I was talking with D Jones, he would always be like sometimes with Mangum, he don't know if they've gotten to that spot just yet. You know, lets me know that they've kind of been having some years where they kind of been trying to get some things going that's not necessarily went the way that they might have wanted it to go. With that being said though, for me, I'm gonna have to ride with Haynesville on this one. I think Haynesville's gonna be able to cap off a phenomenal season that they've had. And you know, I know shout out to my man Tyler. I know he's gonna be talking noise when I see him again. So next game we got number 1, Gina, coming into this game against number 2, Sterlington, the non-select Division 3. So the Division 4 matchup was number 1 team versus number 2 team, and the select Division 3 matchup now is another number 1 team versus another number 2 team with Gina going up against Sterlington. And man, you already know, man, I'm not going against Sterlington, man. Sterlington, I got a lot of respect for because they played that smash mouth physical style of football that football was built upon. And they weren't those teams that basically saying, man, we might not have the best athletes, we might not have the fastest guys, we might not even have the strongest guys, but what we gonna have are guys that are gonna be well conditioned and physical, and we're gonna punch y'all in the mouth for 4 quarters, play after play after play. Now, if y'all can withstand those punches and stand firm, keep your feet firmly cemented up under you, you're gonna have a chance at being able to beat us. But if y'all can't withstand those blows, we're going to have a long day coming for you. You're going to have a very, 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 very long day coming for you, man. So I'm not quite sure if Gina will be able to stand up in front of Sterlington with that type of smash mouth football play after play after play. And then the thing about Sterlington, like Sterlington, considering that they are a run-heavy offense, the opportunities for turnovers are very minimal, right? Because they don't pass the ball. We know that bad things happen when you pass the ball, right? When you pass the ball, you got chances of quarterback making wrong read, throw an interception. You got chances of the ball being tipped at the line of scrimmage lead to an interception. You got the chance of your quarterback taking an unnecessary sack that puts you in behind the sticks. You got a chance of your quarterback being strip sacked. You got a chance of your wide receiver tipping the ball up to a cornerback. So there's so many different things that can lead to turnovers when passing the ball, whereas running the ball, for the most part, as long as you prioritize ball security, keeping that thing high and tight when you're going into traffic, protecting that thing with two arms, it takes away from the chances of turnover. So you already are at a deficit there because you can't really dominate with that. And then when you're dealing with a team like that Sterlington, man, it just continuously to pound you, slow and steady, man, putting together 10-play drives, 12-play drives. Some drives might even be longer than that, man. That just wear and tears on the defense, and it almost puts your offense in a position of saying that if we're not efficient with what we do offensively, this game can get out of hand very, very quickly. And it goes back to what I was saying too. Even if you got a dominant offense that likes to sling the ball around, or is even a balanced team, they can't really be that effective when they're on the sideline. And I think that's one of the advantages that Sterlington have going into that game with the way that they play. So obviously, man, I'm gonna have to go with Sterlington. I'm gonna have to key them in to be able to repeat with last year and this year. Next game we got North DeSoto at the number 1 seed going up against Iowa, who's number 2 seed. So this is another number 1 versus number 2. This is a select division 2 matchup, and I'm gonna have to go with North DeSoto on that one. This is the reason why. Once again, I'm gonna tell y'all. Let me go and write my pick on there real fast. But this is the reason why. So I look at it and I say to myself, okay. When North DeSoto played West Monroe, like I said early on, I did not expect them to win that game. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Once again, it's me thinking because I come from 5A, it's 4A versus 5A. West Monroe should win that game with ease, and they was able to pull that game off. So it shows me that they have confidence within themselves to go up against teams that's quote-unquote better than them and say, man, we get that y'all might be 5A. We get that y'all might be West Monroe. We get all those things. But at the end of the day, once again, once we step in between those white lines, that's all that freaking matter. And they was able to pull off that win considering the team that West Monroe had, especially offensively, man, being that they got Big Punchy in the backfield. You got Trez Davis on the outside. You got a quarterback that can get the ball to him and that can be mobile in situations, man. So they are pretty efficient offense. They run RPO, things like that. So it shows me that they have guys that can match up on the outside in terms of athletes, but then they also have those dogs that's in the interior. They can say, man, if we need to bite down our mouthpiece and strap up our chin strap to make these hits, we can do that. So it shows to me that they have a well-balanced team. And then considering that they fell behind early on in that game last week, where it could have been one of those situations where everything could have just snowballed after that, right? But they was able to come back, they was able to do what they had to do, and they was able to pull that game off. So with that being said, seeing that they got all of those things there, I think that they're going to be a hard team to beat, and I think that they just have that confidence, feeling like, man, hey, man, we are them dudes, and we come here to play, we come here to show y'all this with no fluke of the season, that it's really like that. So I think that North DeSoto is going to end up pulling that game off. Now, we're going to get to the non-select Division 1 matchup. It's going to be a divisional rematch between Ouachita and Ruston. So you got Ruston coming into this game, number 1 seed, going to be against Ouachita coming into this game, number 14, and number 14 seed. And just like I said early on, based off of positioning of the seats, a lot of people probably would have figured to have, I'm going to get a little closer on this one, but a lot of people were saying that, don't be surprised if Ouachita upset some teams. And then, like I said, too, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily saying that, Ouachita wasn't good. We're just going based off a position of where they were at in the playoffs, right? Being that they had lost so many division games, but it was in Division 2 5A. Let me take the gum off food. But it was against the Division 2 5A teams, 2 in which who ended up making it to the semifinals with Neville and Ruston, and 1 in which was 1 week away from it with Ash, and then the previous week was on West Monroe. So with that being said, man, when you look at both teams are similar in a lot of ways in terms of what they do offensively. It might look a little different, but it is the same in a lot of ways with the ball management, with the possession, putting together drives and trying to just keep the offense on the field, rest their defense up, and keep those somewhat high-powered offense that they might be going up against on the sidelines. Like I was saying with Sterlington, if you're a team like Ouachita that's saying, man, Ruston got a lot of pieces over there. You got the quarterback Sam Hartwell, who's mobile himself, who can make plays with his legs. They got good running backs with Freeman and with I can't think of his name right now, number 23. Obviously, you got the number 1 tight end in the state of Louisiana, I think even in the nation, in Ahmad Hudson. You got good receivers, Josiah Morgan and guys like that can step up for you. You want to try to keep that and the offensive line who's moving stuff around, you want to try to keep that offense on the sideline as much as possible. And we know with Washita's style of play, they have the capability to do that, considering that they run a lot of zone read, a lot of split zone and stuff like that. They're not really a heavy RPO team. They do utilize RPO, but it's not the basis of what they do. The basis of what they do, to me, is kind of similar to the Russian approach, bro. We're going to punch out in the mouth, play after play, and if y'all ain't strong enough to withstand it, then it's going to be a long day for y'all. But both of these teams, similar playing style, smash mouth football, I think they match up equally in a sense, like kind of like how it was with Rustin and Zachary, and kind of how it was with Rustin and Southside. Similar playing styles. They're not necessarily teams that's going to come out there, spread you out, and really just air the ball out. Rustin will throw the ball, in my opinion, a little bit more, and I do feel that they're a little bit more comfortable with throwing the ball than Washita is. Washita will throw, but like I said, Washita more so is run, and take shots downfield here and there. Considering the situation, maybe if they're down, they might throw the ball a little bit more, and I think that's what leads to them kind of throwing, getting a little bit indecisive with the decision making in terms of kind of throwing interceptions and things like that, because I think West Monroe was able to get up on them early on in that game, and West Monroe, and it kind of put them in a position to where they had to kind of play a style of football that they're not necessarily comfortable. Not saying they can't do it, but they're not necessarily comfortable with, right? You look at these three teams. These three teams have been able to kind of dominate for the most part on all three phases of the ball: offense, special teams, and defense. You look at the return that Rustin ended up getting in the game against Southside. That kind of changed the momentum of the game. You look at obviously what Waddell was able to do against Destrehan with being able to get those returns. And then I think a lot of people don't pay attention to, like, even with returns, you got to also look at, just because it's not returned for a touchdown, look at where it's putting them at position-wise, field position-wise, because that's everything. Where you're positioned at, your play calling, your versatility with play calling and the options, I would say more so, is going to be different when you at the 20 or anything from the 20 and behind, opposed to when you're working from the 20 and above, whether it's from the 20 to the 30 and then from the 40 to the 50 plus field territory. Obviously, what you can call is a little bit more open, and then two, it makes you not have to put together long drive, 10-play drives to be able to combat against some of these defenses. If you're going up against a good defense, you don't want to try to put together long drives like that, because the chances of you being able to successfully put 10 to 12-play drives together on a good defense is kind of very hard to do. But if you're able to kind of flip field position and cut the field in half and have to work half the way, it puts you in a good position. And if you got a good field goal kicker, it kind of guarantees that you're coming up with some points regardless. If we're able to get maybe 2 first downs, we get 3 points, and I like my odds with that. You know what I mean? So when you look at all three, when you look at those two teams, they do bring that to the table. You look at Rustin, who has kind of struggled this year defensively. Look at when they was going up against Zachary, they was kind of constantly getting blown off the ball play after play after play. You don't really like to see that. And even when you look at when they played in the regular season, man, for the most part, Washita was kind of having it with running the ball with them as well. I think Dave might have had over 100 yards rushing, and I think he might even had a whole 100 yards rushing before the half even ended. Like, that's how successful they were with running the ball. Now, the pass, whenever they did take their shots deep, Rustin did a good job at standing tall and being able to defend it. And that's the only thing that I think about Washita, is that I think that their pass concepts in a sense are kind of very one-dimensional, because it's almost go ball or not. Now, you also got to look at, okay, what is the teachings of the quarterback in that system? You have a thing where you have true read regressions, where a quarterback is taught to read 1, 2, 3, 4. If 1 is open, he get it. 2 is open, he get it. 3 is open, he get it. 4 is open, he get it. You're not reading coverages. You're just reading that one read, and whoever is open first gets the ball. And how often are you going to get to your 3rd and 4th read? More times than not, it's not. So more times than not, your only read is probably going to be your number one guy, who is Waddell Clark, who is a phenomenal playmaker, who's been able to do it for you all season long. So in my opinion, if they're able to kind of take that first read option out of the case, now you may kind of have to be mobile. Now, granted, like I was saying, Connor is a problem, man. Like, that dude is a phenomenal athlete. Like, just looking at what he's able to do week after week, man. Just look at some of the plays he was able to make in the Destrehan game. Like, I remember there was one play where they hiked the ball over his head. This dude ran all the way in the backfield, picked the ball up, was able to, kind of maneuver by some time, throw the ball downfield, end up getting a pass interference. That could have easily went worse than what it was. He could have just fell down on that and just be like, man, I'm going to just take my losses. But the playmaking instinct was to say, man, we got to make something happen. This is the playoffs. This could be a deciding factor in us losing this game. He picked the ball up and is able to make something out of nothing. That's the potential that he has. Now, granted, I think a lot of what they do offensively, like my man D. Jones say, it's kind of hard to prepare for. I think a lot of what they do offensively is kind of off-script football in a sense. And hey, kudos to when you have a guy that's as good and as talented as Connor. When you have a guy that has the capability to be able to make plays with his legs, it gives you the option to say, okay, he can make the second play better than the first play. Meaning that if the first option or the second option maybe isn't there, I still got my legs, right? And that's still what I can hit you with in a sense, and that's kind of what Hartwell was doing against Zachary. But you have the same thing in Connor as well, who can do that as well. So he's a problem there. And then, like I say, man, you look at a lot of plays where you have guys that's in position to get to him. He's just so hard to get onto the ground, man. So I think it's one of those things that you got to kind of look at it from Russell's standpoint and say, man, we have to be good in our rush lanes whenever they do throw the ball, to not run past him and give him opportunities to step up and take off running. We got to be very disciplined with our rush lanes. Sometimes we have to understand that, man, we're not going to be able to get to this dude to sack him. So we can't play for the sack. We just got to play to keep him contained, right? We got to play when we go in for our rushes, opposed to trying to rush and get upfield to get to the quarterback. Just hold your ground, and then if he tries to throw the ball, get your hands up to try to deflect him. That's the type of thing that you have to do with Connor. And then most definitely you have to keep a spy on him at all times. Somebody has to be mirroring him. And considering Mercer likes to play a lot of man coverage, you can have a low hole guy that kind of sits there and take away the little shallow routes that's coming across the middle, which they don't really run a lot of. But then also is a guy who shadows Connor, a spot that keeps him contained, and make sure we have a body on him, man, because if not, it's going to be a long day for him. And like I say, the thing about a guy like him, that he makes you have to change up your defensive alignment, you know what I mean? Because you always have to account for what he can do. So now you have to think about spies. Now you have to think about having those rat defender, low hole defender, and those cover zeros or cover ones, whatever you running, because Wrestling likes to run a lot of man. So now it leaves you vulnerable in other aspects of it. So it's almost, to me, I think it's going to come down to a game of chess matches. Okay, what if we can't stop them? What do we go to now? Or what if they are able to stop us? How do we rebound from it? And like I say, I like the chances of Rustin. If they're able to stop Rustin running the ball, I'm confident at Rustin being able to make something happen through the air going up against their secondary, which I do believe is a good secondary. But I'm not just the most confident in their pass offense in terms of Washita going up against Rustin there. So, man, like I say, man, this is going to be an even matchup in my opinion. These are two good football teams, have phenomenal players. I think you have good coaching, regardless of what you want to say about Washita. I know a lot of times that's one of the things we throw up is that, man, if it wasn't for, or man, if the coaching would have been this, then Washita might be this good. And that could also be a thing too, because I think everybody has room for improvement. But at the same time, for them to get to this point, it lets you know that coaching has to be good to an extent. So, you know, both programs have pretty good coaching, pretty good players. So I'm just interested to see how this thing plays out. But I think the deciding factor is going to be how is Rustin able to contain Connor. That's my biggest thing. Offensively from Rustin, man, I'm confident that Rustin is going to be able to move the ball. I wouldn't say with ease, but they're going to be able to move the ball successfully against Washita's defense. I mean, if you ask me, you look at Zachary. I think Zachary had just as good of a defense, and Rustin, for the most part, was able to dominate them in the trenches. So I think that that's what it's going to come down to. Obviously, I think another thing it's going to come down to is possibly special teams. You know what I mean? If they're able to, you know, either side is able to get a block punt, able to get a block kick, something that could potentially take points off the board, or something that could potentially flip the field position. Like I said in the Neville game, you look at Neville was able to stop them first drive. He got down to the red zone. They get the ball back 3 and out. Washita get a punt, put them back in similar position, and is able to score on that next drive. So those are the things I'm talking about when you're going up against a defense that you're struggling to move. Those special teams plays come into play, whether it's Waddell being able to get a return, whether it's Rustin being able to get a return, whether it's Washita being able to block a punt, whether it's Rustin being able to block a punt and flip field position and put their offense in a better position. I think that's going to be one of the things it's going to come down to. I think it's going to be a fairly quick game, kind of similar to the Zach and Rustin, because both teams are going to come out there and they're going to play smash mouth football and they're going to run the ball. Like I said, it's very similar offenses, but just different ways of doing it. You know, Rustin going to hit you from shotgun, handoff. Rustin going to hit you from under center, I formation, handoff, get that lead guy in front of you. And Washita does a similar thing, but a lot of it is from a zone read standpoint, where you have a very good chance at Connor being able to keep the ball himself and hurt you with his legs. So it's almost one of the things you have to say from a defensive perspective is, okay, how do we want them to hurt us, right? How do we want to dictate to them what they do? And I think that Rustin they're very undersized, obviously, up front on their defense. You know, the D-line, linebackers, they're kind of undersized, right? So the strength of them is their athleticism and their speed. So obviously, we like our chances of saying, hey, man, we're going to clog up the middle, and we want our linebackers just sideline to sideline being able to stay over things. So when y'all try to run those plays where you're using the puller, I want my linebackers to stay over the top of it and beat them to the spot in a sense. So I like my chances there. But we know that Rustin have struggled with those A-gap, B-gap runs. And Washita, for the most part, don't really bounce a lot of runs to the outside. That's what makes them so much more impressive, especially Connor, man, that he's not scared to take it into the teeth of a defense. But I think it's going to come down to one of them things like Coach Kirby Smart say, at some point, somebody going to have to get their chin split open. So you got got to make it to the point to where when Connor decides, okay, I'm going to take off running, we're going to make you pay when you take off running. Because once you take off running, you declare yourself as a runner there and you're not back there in the pocket. Now we can put some fire onto you, but now it's going to come down to him being able to get down before the offense can get to him. But if he's trying to play hero ball and trying to maximize on the yards gain, our defense has to take advantage of that and start putting Atlanta wood to him, make him have to second guess keeping that ball, opposed to just handing that thing off and saying, nah, we're going to take our chances here. So like I said, man, it's going to be a very interesting game, but man, I do think that Rustin is going to end up coming out victorious in this game, to end up, to capture their second state championship in 4 years. So the next game we have is the number 5 seed Ascension Catholic going up against number 2 Riverside Academy. Pretty interesting game. This is the Select Division 4. Yeah, now we're on to Select. That was all non-select. So this is a Select Division 4 game. You got the number 5 seed Ascension Catholic going up against the number 2 seed Riverside Academy. And man, honestly, I think that on that one right there, man, I'm gonna have to ride with Riverside Academy on that one. I'm gonna have to go with them on that one right there. So the next game we got now is we got the Select Division 3 championship. Oh, this is gonna be a good game, man. We got the number 5 seed Dunham coming in to take on the number 6 seed Calvary. Obviously, Dunham surprised me, man. When I say surprised, I don't mean in terms of me thinking that they wasn't a good football team, but I was just so sold on LCA. That's what I mean by surprise. So I was so sold on LCA that I was kind of shocked to see that they ended up losing that game. But LCA fought hard, made the competitive game, and they ended up winning the game last minute. Kind of like the game that they ended up winning against Evangel. They ended up winning that last minute. Dunham did with 1 point, and then you look at Calvary. Considering how their season went, I'm pretty sure nobody kind of had them picked to be back in the state championship, considering everything that they lost, and probably kind of just looking at the trajectory of their season. But they've been able to show that they're battle tested and they can fight. It's crazy because these are the number 5 seeds and the number 6 seeds. Considering that they was able to beat out all the other seeds is even more impressive. But with that being said, man, I think that I'm gonna have to a part of me want to be biased and say I'm going to have to go with the North Louisiana option, which is Calvary, but my football mind is telling me that, man, I think I'm going to have to ride with Dunham on this one, man. So I think I'm going to have to ride with Dunham on this game right here. So the next game we got the number 1 seed. This is for the Select Division 2. So we got the number 1 seed. Now, this was a rematch of the regular season, actually. Yeah, this was a rematch where St. Charles actually won this game 24-0 up against Shaw. So we got the number 1 seed St. Charles coming into this game, going against number 7 seed Archbishop Shaw. And obviously this game is going to be an interesting game. Now, Shaw is another one of those teams where, consider, and it's much even more impressive, Shaw actually won state championship last year too. So they're actually getting there 2 years in a row. So and considering that they lost their running back, I think it was Jasper Parker was a dog, man. I love that dude. They ended up losing him. I think he ended up going to Michigan. I think they might have lost a couple more pieces too. But once again, once you have a good program and a good culture, then once you lose some of those guys, man, it's just next man up and the next man jump into the game. But you got the number 1 seed going up against the number 7 seed, and Shaw was another one of those teams that kind of had ssimilar path that Union had. I know early on they played teams like Carr, who shut them out, and I think they played Holy Cross, who shut them out, if I'm not mistaken too. So I think they might have been. I think that Shaw might have been shut out on 3 different occasions, if I'm not mistaken. But with that being said, it just shows you that they're battle tested. They have a level of grit there to them. And like I said, once again, when you match up against teams like Carr, teams like Holy Cross that are 5A teams and you're 4A, technically they're supposed to win those games. But it's battles within those games that make you feel confident in what you got. And like I said, when you go back to film and you say, man, we did this good. If only we would have done this, it might have changed the outcome. And once you start looking at what the things that because to me, it doesn't give you a false sense of security. When you're beating teams that technically you're supposed to beat, that you're better than, it makes you think everything is perfect, and it's not. Nothing is never perfect. There's always going to be things that you can do better. But if you're not going up against equal competition, it gives you a false sense of security because the things that you're weak at, teams aren't able to exploit. Now when you run up on teams that's just as good as you, they're able to exploit those things, and now you're saying, man, I'm not as good as I thought I was, you know what I mean? So it gives you a reality check. So I'm never against playing against upper competition because it prepares you. Because like I said, once you go up against equal competition or teams that might be a little bit better than you or a little bit sorrier than you, but you're right there in the same graph. I mean, you looking at, man, y'all don't present nothing that we haven't already seen before. We got shut out against Carr. Hey man, teams have struggled that's on their level in 5A to move the ball on them. Y'all don't possess them over there. And there was things that we did in that game that we knew that okay, going into games that was equally like this game right here, we're gonna have success with it. So with that being said, man, I'm gonna have to go with Shaw on that one right there, man. I'm gonna have to ride with Shaw. I'm gonna have to key Shaw in for a 2-peat, man, being that they won last year. And then the very last game, man, obviously we got the battle for New Orleans, man. We got this was actually a division rematch from the season 2 from the Catholic League, where Carr was able to beat them 42-21. You got the number 1 seed Edna Carr coming into this game, going up against the number 3 seed St. Aug, battle for New Orleans, because both of these teams is out of New Orleans. Both of these teams have phenomenal bands. My man D Jones, man, I know if he was in this video, that's one of the things he would have been talking about. We would have been talking about the game too, but D Jones most definitely would have been talking about the battle of the bands. He was already telling me, like, man, I showed my wife and them the battle that they had in the season, and then he's like, man, they had another battle, I think, at some little parade that they might have had. He's like, he thinks St. Aug won that one too. So it's a lot of stuff coming behind this game. Now it goes back to what you said, right? So same thing with the Rustin and Watch Talk game. It's 2 narratives that you can look at this from. So you can say it's hard to beat a team twice, right? Beat them in the regular season. Now you got to play them in the postseason, right? So you can look at it from that. It's hard to beat a team twice. Then you can look at it from a narrative of saying, well, I think that the other team is good. No, don't get me wrong. But when I look at Carr, I think that they're more familiar with the moment. When I look at Rustin, I think they're more familiar with the moment, being that they've been here 4 years in a row. This team hasn't been here recently, right? So they're not used to playing in that dome. They're not used to playing under those lights. They're not used to hearing that big of a crowd, because when you in the dome, you can pack out more seats than any of the high school stadiums, and the more seats that you got, the more obviously the more noise potential that you have in that game. So you can look at it from that angle and say that, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to whatever team comes out there and executes and plays the best. Whatever team prepares the best for one, and what team that comes out there to execute. And it was an interesting tape, and I was looking at Crescent City Sports. They was doing interviews, leading up to the game, and they was interviewing guys like Richard Anderson, Hayward Howard, John Johnson. And they interviewed Richard Anderson. They was like, what did they say? They asked him like, what struggles do St. Aug possibly present, or what's the challenge? And he was like, I wouldn't say that it's a challenge. He's like, I just think it's going to be a fun game. Being that, you got cousins, guys that's been knowing each other all their lives, going up and competing against each other. You might have family members that went to Carr, and that's all cousins that's going up against each other and things like that, childhood friends. So you got that level of competitiveness. So it's going to be fun because y'all been competing since y'all were kids. And I'm pretty sure y'all probably was thinking that one day, man, hopefully either we're able to play with each other for a championship, or we're able to go up against each other for a championship. And you're able to get that opportunity this year with Edna Carr versus St. Aug. And I know Coach Bryce Brown was saying that St. Aug might be mad that they can't wear purple. So Carr was going to be arguing, it's going to be the team that's wearing purple, because he was saying that we're the number 1 seed, we're the top dog, so we're able to dictate that and we're able to say that. So that could be another mental battle that he's already playing. Like, oh man, we can't wear purple. Oh, he want to play that now. Because obviously, like Deion Sanders said, man, you look good. You look good, you feel good. You feel good, you play good. You play good, you pay good. So obviously, man, you want to come out there swagged up, dripped out, and that kind of enhances your play in the game. And being that like, man, we can't wear purple, man. I had my cleats purple, I had my gloves. Like, we had already had this predicted because we knew we was gonna get here. And now he throw this in there. It's like, oh, now they playing them type of games, man. So it's gonna be a very interesting matchup. But when I look at it, I say, and I was looking at another show, and they was talking about the underrated aspect of Carr's game offensively. It's like we look at the pass and we look at everything that they're able to do with John Johnson and that core of receivers. I think that we kind of overlook the strength of the run game and look at what they're able to do. So I think that was a very big part of them beating Catholic too, was being that they can run the ball. And obviously we know John Johnson can run the ball, but that offensive line is blocking. You got Garrison, who's toting that thing. I know they call him one-man army, nice sized kid, and he be toting that thing. Very strong physical runner. So I look at what they do there, and I'm looking at Aug, and I'm saying, okay, Aug struggled against Acadiana, right? What does Acadiana do? Smash mouth, down your throat football. They, had a tough game against Curtis. What does Curtis do? smash mouth down your throat running. Ain't no bouncing outside all A gap B gap things, right? So offensively, it's a little different. Different playing styles, being that it's more of a triple option veer thing, where Carr's a lot more RPO based and things like that. But nevertheless, when you got a good offensive line, big guys up there that's moving stuff around, and when you got a running back like Trey Garrison that's coming down with a full head of steam, man, that's something that you don't want to see. And my thing is, how can you hold up over the course of 4 quarters having to deal with that? And then not only that, man, like I say, Carr does a good job at being able to stretch to make you defend all blades of grass with the RPOs. They trying to put guys in the conflict. And then now if you try to take away conflict defenders with man coverage, like how I was saying that Washington was doing against Neville, are your cats better than their cats? Can we draw up route concepts if they're not, to try to be able to beat that? And if you can't necessarily beat it, it puts you in a very bad position. But I do think that the outlier in that is, once again, is John Johnson, because more times than not, you see games where the coverage on the back end is good, but we don't contain him, and he runs free and he hurts us. I mean, you look at the game last year when they played Ash, his legs was a very deciding factor in that game, because he played fairly poorly in that game. I think might have like 3 or 4 interceptions, and they still were able to win that game 53-8, which is crazy. But a lot of it came from him being able to make plays with his legs. So that's also one of those things that makes them so hard, because now once we start having to try to commit guys to spy him, now we're taking guys out of potential pass coverage defenders. You know what I mean? So now we got matchups on the outside, like with Xavier Owens, with number 3, I can't think of his name, from Carr, that we don't necessarily want. So they give you present you a lot of problems. And then we know that the explosive play capability that they have on special teams with returns on kicks, returns on punts, we've seen them be able to do it throughout the course. Wilford on number 3 throughout the course of the season. The only outlier that I think with Carr, to me, is like kind of the special teams in terms of their field goal kicking. If you're able to hold them out of the end zone, and even if they are able to get in field goal position, do they have the confidence in their kicker to be able to consistently knock those field goals down? So I think that if you can come out and play defense, and kind of make John Johnson have to, put together long drives opposed to getting explosive plays downfield, I like your chances of that, because obviously we know that he is kind of prone to turnovers. But the thing I do love about him as well is that his confidence never shakes. So at the end of the day, you like, okay, we're going to take those turnovers, because he even threw a pick 6 in the game, in the regular season game against St. Aug. But we know one thing, he's not going to be rattled from it. We've seen him do it last year in the state championship game. 53-8 was the outcome. We've seen him do it this year in the American Heritage game, which they ended up winning in overtime. So we've seen him do that throughout the course of his career. So what's going to change now? And then 2, I think a lot of people forget that I think that Carr's playing for something much bigger than what you can fathom, and that's being that they're dedicating this season or this championship to their lost soldier, which was Corey Adams, who was a part of the state championship team last year. Man, phenomenal player. I think had the capability of being able to have a shot at playing on the next league. Obviously, unfortunately, his life was taken from him due to gun violence. So I think that that's one of the things that's kind of amping them up even more, is just wanting to do it for their fallen soldiers. So I think that's one of the things that my man D Jones says. It gets deeper than football when you get like that. And just hearing how those guys talk and the confidence they have within themselves and the program and the culture that they have up there at Carr, I think they're a hard team to match up with, man. You got to really come out there and really execute on all 3 phases of the ball, and you got to really come out there and you got to kind of be I wouldn't say play perfect, but you got to play efficient game. You can't really be turning the ball over. You can't have lost possessions. You got to try to make the most of every possession that you get, and that's kind of hard. But they put so much pressure on you like that, and they're a very explosive offense. They're a very physical defense. One thing about it, they don't really hide what they do. Like Hayward Howard said in the interview, man, we're gonna come out here and we're gonna do what we do. We're gonna play press man, bump and run, and they just gonna have to be able to beat that. Now, do I think that they have the capability of beating that? That's the biggest question. Do I think that even if they do have the capability of beating that, is their offensive line going to be able to hold up with the pass rush with Richard Anderson, Jewel Baptiste, and number 15? I think his name is Romeo Dobbs, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mispronouncing your name, my bad. I think he's number 15, but that dude is a dog. I know Richard Anderson gets a lot of credit, which he deserves, because he pushes that pocket up front. But them guys on the outside also do their thing too. Those were very good complementary pieces on the outside for him as well. So do they think that they're going to be able to hold up long enough for those plays to develop downfield? That's going to be a big question as well. But with that being said, man, I'm gonna have to go with Carr on that game, and I think Carr's gonna be able to, complete their back-to-back state championship run, man. So, like I say, man, this was an interesting season. Season is almost over, which is so wild to me, considering that it seemed like just yesterday the season had just started. Me and D Jones were just talking about, man, we gotta start back filming. It was the spring game and stuff, and now looking at where we at now, the season has kind of been like a blur in a sense. So been a very impressive season. A lot of teams got opportunities to make repeats from being previous state champions champions. You got some teams that's able to try to make their first state championship win in years, or in a while. So it's a very interesting how it's gonna play out. And you already know my guy D Jones, he's gonna be back next week. So when we do our recap, he's gonna be able to give his take on things and what he was able to see. And he probably might briefly touch on what was why he, like, whatever the outcome was, he thought was the outcome that he would have been able to touch on if he would have been able to be here today doing a video. But with that being said, man, if you guys did enjoy this video, man, do me a big favor, man. Smash that thumbs up button. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you click that notification bell. Also, man, if you got anything to say, if you agree, disagree, or if you feel like it was some points that I might have missed to talk about, because I'm pretty sure it was, being that I was trying to fit everything into this video and not really just go too long about things. But if it's anything that you feel that I missed on or anything I agree with, man, make sure you let me know in the comments, man. That's what those comments there are for. We look forward to seeing you guys engage me with us, just communicating and let us talk there. Like, shout out to my man Audioholic. He always come on there and talk about Union and games like that, Sterlington and stuff like that. So shout out to him. And then you got another guy, I can't think of his name too. He always is schooling me on the history of teams like Edna Carr, which he knows a lot of Louisiana high school football. But more specifically, I know he always comments on a lot of my videos with Edna Carr, so I always look forward to hearing his take on things. So, man, I most definitely look forward to hearing your take on what you think about this. So, man, make sure you do that in the comments, and, man, we'll see y'all next week on the final edition of Third and Long for this football season, man. We'll see y'all next week, so stay tuned.